Stephen Kwan is the Guardians Chess Club champion. Is the Guardians manager making some chess moves of his own on the baseball field?
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We have, what they would call in the old days of, I just don't watch it anymore, but I assume it's not really the old days. They still do it, of Jeopardy, a potpourri show. We get to touch on a lot of topics. It's going to be fun in that regard, a chance to take all these little things that are occurring, put them together, and have a potpourri show. And hopefully, the only person I ever knew who had potpourri was my grandmother. So, hopefully you'll have something that smells nice around you in honor of the show. Light up a candle, sit back, and enjoy our dulcet tones.
Better than a poo-poo platter, hopefully.
Yeah.
I hope the show's better than
De Los Santos can't make the team. They traded him to San Diego for Scott Barlow.
Darn. All right. Well, thanks for the show.
Moving on
off the bat. Yeah, that topic's over. They traded him along with Shane Bieber to some team too. Of all the trades that happened this winter. I thought Steven Vogt's comments on Tuesday were interesting. We touched on it a little bit in a previous episode. I know I touched on a little bit in a mailbag last week, but it just sounds like they're going to give De Los Santos every opportunity to make the club, which makes sense. They talked about De Los Santos working the outfield. We briefly touched on that, and he kind of confirmed that today. And obviously people who are at spring training, I won't be there till next week, but can confirm he is, taking reps in the outfield. And you also talked about right and left and first and third base. And obviously, DH is an area he could also fill in at. But I think it's interesting that they are, it makes sense to do it. I mean, you spent the pick on him and you didn't go out and add anybody else externally, offensively speaking, which we'll touch on in a little bit as well. But if you're going to go this route, if you think that you really believe that De Los Santos can make an impact in the organization, he has impact tools, you're willing to live with the swing and miss, then putting him in position to do everything he can to make the team versus making it harder for him. This makes it easier for him. Like, he is going to get a lot of reps in spring training. I think you're going to see him in a lot of games. They're going to see him in a lot of different positions. Why not do everything you can to give this guy every opportunity? Because clearly Arizona was not afraid of losing him all that much. They didn't protect him. And I don't think Arizona had like a long list of guys who were like, they had to leave him off. I think that they could have protected him. I don't know their 40-man situation that well, but I have to assume that they didn't have that big of an issue.
Jam-packed. They've had a lot of years.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, because they've been picking in the top 10 most years until this year. If you pull it up, I mean, there's like someone like Blake Walton, but do you want to take off, a 22-year-old lefty who had a down year? It's kind of the situation Cleveland had. They've only got two catchers. Blaze Alexander is another guy they could have maybe taken off, who was, but he's around that top 10 prospect range. Adding Jace Peterson is a little bit weird relative to all things, but they're a team that, just looking at the outfield mix, it's like they just ended Randall Gerchik, so this didn't count against him, but Corbin Carroll, Jorge Barrosa. They didn't have Gurriel at the time, Jake McCarthy, Jock Peterson, Pavin Smith, Alec Thomas.
Peterson at the time either.
They have Peterson at the time. But, it's some of the reasons why they traded someone like Christian Franklin. They made a few of those other moves to clear spots. But they've been picking high for a lot of years, and that day has kind of come due. And, they did not have a ton of spots. I don't believe they added anyone in the Rule 5. And for Cleveland, it's definitely a bet on a good month and a half, the swing change that kind of changed everything.
Yeah. I mean, I bet you Arizona probably also thought that there was very little chance that De Los Santos was going to get taken in the Rule 5. And if he did, he wouldn't stick. that's always the argument. It's like, I know a lot of people will sit there and say, well, this guy looks really great in the minors. Well, that's great. But you also have to factor in like whether or not this guy is even going to get taken. If he does he stick? Because that factors into who you put on your 40-man roster. Now you have to do it by odds of what guys other teams will be interested in and what the probability of them actually making it is. And I'm sure they deemed his probability to low. And I think it still might be low. I don't know. Like you said, it's betting on a month and a half of a really good performance in the swing change. I like to gamble because there's really no risk here, because the only thing you're really not doing is you're not adding somebody external to his spot where you could have added a Jorge Soler or I don't know, whatever, just somebody who's a free agent hitter that is more proven if you wanted to go that route and spend that money, which they didn't, which we're going to touch on again in a little bit. But
it's interesting because
could have gone that route, and instead you just decided to go with De Los Santos. And if you're going to do that, you might as well put him everywhere. So I like the idea of at least being flexible with him and putting him in a position to take advantage of the opportunity and make him feel like he has a chance instead of making it harder for the guy. You know what I mean? Like Rule 5 picks have it really hard. There's a lot of pressure, and Vogt said it really well.
Great opportunity.
Like, right. That's
always feel good for the kids who get that chance. I think what's most interesting in some regards with this, though, is, most everyone said he's first base. That's part of the reason why I think they thought he'd get through. First basemen don't typically get drafted. That's why it was still kind of, even to this point in time, shocking to me that they added like John Kenzie Noel.
Third either.
He played a little bit of third, but when
I watched him, I was not.
Yeah, most people didn't think it said first base only. But to go back to Noel, it's like no one has taken a non up the middle player from like A ball since the last decade. So this was a guy in Double-A who again plays on the corners, and you don't really hear. I mean, I guess there's some talk that he could fill in at third, but he has never played outfield, and they're just throwing him out there, and that's what to me was a really interesting thing. This is we talked about it a bit last year where they're having guys play a majority of innings at one or two positions and then throwing him out there. This is a guy who has no innings in the outfield, and they're like, okay, but this is the time to do it, right? This is the time to try. These are, it's the points don't matter and the score's made up in spring training.
Yeah, whose position is it anyway?
It's what they should have been doing with Ahmed. Remember, we're going to put him in left field. They make that decision the last week of spring training. Right? Like they don't do it all of spring training. That's like, we're going to do it now. And then it was a disaster. So like, good. I sorry, that was very loud. I'm going to apologize to our listeners.
No, do it now. You're right.
But this is the time. Do it now. Go out and see if you can do it. I often think we get too focused. It's like, I'll go back to our talk. I love Carlos. This is not a knock on Carlos, but everyone talks about this idea of like, oh, Banzana is only a second baseman. Ian Happ was only a second baseman. There are a lot of guys like this. Like, second base shouldn't be a limiting factor. If the bat can play there, a guy can probably play at least the corners on the outfield or at least left field if the arm is questionable. I always say, look at the bat first, then worry about position, unless their value is tied to specific defense or elite position. For someone like De Los Santos, that's not the case.
Drafted him. No,
that's not why, they added him. It's the same thing with like a Manzardo. It's like, I don't think it'd be pretty, but I feel like he could probably survive a few innings and left. I mean, that's if you work with guys and you can at least see if that can happen. I mean, the White Sox had Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets, and they just started throwing outfielders out there. And yeah, it wasn't pretty, but man, it
created opportunities.
You got to create opportunities for these guys to play. And you got Quan out there who can cover a ton of ground. You got Straw, who's a good defender, who can come in and fill in.
Brennan.
You have Will Brennan, who was an elite defender as well last year. For all the other issues, he was still an elite defender by a lot of metrics. You have great defenders. You can put one guy out there who's poor. I mean, this team ran Domingo Santana in the outfield one year. Like, they have put some terrible defenders out there. So I like this. I like this change. It is time to make these changes to see if guys like him, you can get away with a poor defender in one of the outfield spots. You can do that. So I'm very happy to see them making this move and making it early.
Yeah, just showing the commitment to doing it, because you could easily have said you made it hard for him to make the team, or maybe because I think the idea with Rule 5 picks sometimes is like, oh, how are you going to hide him on the roster, right? And to a certain extent, you do have to try to put them in positions to succeed so you're not overexposing them, especially a 20-year-old who hasn't played above AA. But that's normally the sentiment, right? Is how can you hide a guy on your 26-man roster and you take him? And spring training is the perfect time to, I don't want to say expose him, but expose him is probably the right way. Like, he's got you. It's very difficult because you could easily ruin a guy. Like, I think people overlook this too when they're talking about calling up prospects and playing this guy every day. And there are certain different psychological ways to look at it. And I know Cleveland has done these studies in the past internally about when is the right time to call a guy up and handling this and not wanting to send back down, because there is sort of a mental effect there that goes into how a prospect develops. We've seen them have guys ride the shuttle and it's ruined them, moving them around, not giving them opportunities. So you don't want to overexpose him and ruin him, right? Because that could be bad. But we've talked about this before, is you want to hide him a little bit, not overexpose him, put him in a position to succeed so you can hang on to him all year. But at the same time, he hasn't played above AA, so he needs reps. Hiding him is not really beneficial to him, because if he essentially goes the whole year with very limited reps, then you send the AAA next year to work on stuff. A, it's a lost year development, and B, you have no idea how he's going to recover from that as a prospect, mentally or developmentally, that you basically just hit him for a whole year. So go out, and I'm not saying you want to throw him to the deep end, because again, that could mess him up too. But like you said, create opportunities, put him in position to succeed, see what you got, and he's got every chance to make the roster because of his situation anyway. Also want to point out too, I know this is going to make me look negative on Jenkins and Noel and some other guys, but yeah, the fact that they went out and drafted this guy in the Rule 5 draft, and they're giving him all these opportunities to play, because in Cleveland, if you don't play two positions, you can't be here, obviously. But giving him this opportunity versus like a guy in your system like Noel or Valera or somebody else to make the opening day roster, and they move Valera around, or they move Noel around a lot, and it hasn't really worked out for all the people who were saying we were negative on him yesterday, which I wasn't surprised by. But giving him the opportunity over Noel, I think, certainly says something about how they feel about.
It's literally what I was typing as a response to one of our everydayers, Muto Mangoman. He talked about how we were low, and he talked about how Nolan Jones struck out more at both levels, and look at how he's doing. And that's it. Well,
we didn't say anything on Noel strikeout rate. It was literally quality of contact.
It's the quality of contact. We're not looking at a strikeout rate. His strikeout rate has gone down, but his quality of contact is bad. I know another everydayer. I'm having my old brain fart. Our friend from online, who's I believe lives in Colombia now, who agreed with us. Zach was talking about how he agreed, and Zach has been a big defender of his, but it's the idea that his quality of contact is bad. And I was just saying, like, they don't take De Los Santos if you believe in Noel, because Noel spent the whole year in AAA, right? Am I wrong there? Most of the year. I mean, he spent all year there. He should be up this year if he is a guy who's going to do it. It's a bad quality of contact. I think he's one of the bottom 5 guys on the 40-man. I think he's one of the guys who's legitimate, because maybe a team claims it, maybe a team doesn't, because it's bad quality of contact. I know we got to go to break, but I'm saying K rate is great, but there's also bad contact, and that was commented of Bobby Bradley as well. So
it was. Well, you can't bet on whether or not De Los Santos is going to make the roster, but you can bet on some other things.
What can you bet on? Well, pretty much anything over at FanDuel.com, at least when it comes to sports. Get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. We talked about, are we going to say over or under on wins this year? Have you done the time? I said we keep saying over until we're right. I'm going to say over.
I'm not ready.
I'm going to say over until we get it right. But again, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to hit your home run. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
All right, missed this the other day. that Chris Antonetti made a comment in a story about the TV contract after it was settled. This was last week. And the quote was, so it wasn't a direct quote, but basically the paraphrasing of the quote from Paul Hoynes was, it will have no effect on the team's payroll because they have to find out who among their young players can succeed. That's an interesting statement. So that, again, we thought all offseason, like maybe the TV deal is holding up some of their, if they're going to make any moves at all, right? And we thought maybe that would be the case. And they're going to get less money, but we've talked about how, like, the share of the overages on luxury taxes was going to make up the difference on that possibly, but basically they're saying didn't make a difference. So that's very interesting. And I'm all for giving young guys the opportunity, but again, I feel like you're in the spot again where you have to say, yeah, we want to win the division. And everyone's going to say they want to win the division. The Royals are going to say they want the division, and the White Sox, I don't know if they're going to say it, but every team's going to say, yeah, we want to win the division. We want to make a playoff spot. You know, there's X amount of playoff spots now. So, but with this being said, you're in a position to say again that, yeah, we want to win, but we also want to develop young players at the same time. And we've seen how hard that is. I know there's somebody who's going to be shouting into Twitter for me saying that, but it is very hard to do both those things. Like, you can sit there and say, yeah, we want to win, but, you know, so doing those two things at the same time is very hard, and it makes more sense to commit to one or the other. But, you know, very few teams are going to admit and say, well, we're not trying to win this year, unless you're, you know, Oakland or the White Sox
or Kansas City, who
they think they're going to win. People think they're
going to win this year. It's still very weird to me, just because of how poor they were a year ago, and because they're just really poor development. So, to get back to the main point here, I thought it was interesting just because it was like, hey, yeah, you thought we didn't have money to spend. We did have money to spend. We're just not spending it.
Chose not to spend.
Which sounds terrible. Like, that is totally, you're better off saying,
now
oh,
the
no,
fans want to hear.
No, that's not how you, like, again, this team is failing at marketing. Like, I don't know whose job that is, but, you know, I don't know.
I work in marketing with Day. Call me. I'm available.
You know, I don't want to crap on anyone's job, but it's like, how often do you see everyone complain on Twitter that, like, they don't do a big fun thing when prospects get called up? Like, every other team is doing this except for Cleveland. Like, they need to sell their young players because they're not going to sign free agents. We've learned that. You know, it's not like people are coming out and giving a maze for adding Hedgie. Like, we love Hedgie. Like, for personality, they got one of the best personalities. But that doesn't necessarily,
coach, right?
You know, win you a lot of things. It's like they need to promote their young players because that is where their star power is going to come from. And the fact that they're not doing that, the fact that, you know, they let the ownership get out there and make just terrible. I mean, I will make jokes about Enjoy them for the rest of my life. I will make jokes about real fans buy luxury boxes for the rest of my life. It's like someone needs to step up. And then, like, that article, you know, Hoynes got the ability to talk to the front office. So, you know, there's some degree of back and forth. It's like, you know, at least I would have been like, hey, can you print this clarification on that? Like, I'm surprised someone didn't say anything, because it just makes them look poor. It's better if they are poor than if they look poor. And this made them look poor. And my only response is, it's like, they better have some extensions set up or something like that,
exactly,
that are going to go out, because otherwise it looks like, yeah, I agree. At some point, you have to let these young players get a chance. Like, why did they fail with Jones and Benson? That's a possibility. That's not why they failed with Urshela. I know people sometimes still bring him up. That was a different can of worms. But you don't want. I mean, okay, I'm going to get myself in trouble with this. It's like, I thought Yu Chen Chang should have got a longer look. It didn't work for him. That's an example where it failed, but, like, he didn't get even as much chances that Bobby Bradley or Jake Bauers got. Like, those are the last guys who failed, who got that super extended look. I think they do need to let young players play. I also wouldn't be opposed to one more vet on a team that was last year almost chastised and write-ups by media about the lack of vets when Cole Calhoun was signed. Remember all the articles about the lack of leadership? And I think there's a world where you add an Adam Duvall, you add something like that, you add a player who can contribute while still giving opportunities for young players. But that also means you have to realize at points that, like, Miles Straw is not a starter. And we're seeing in the comments, it sounds that way, but it's like, he is a backup. He is your 26 man, and he's going to stay in that role because he makes too much money to be cut and no one's going to acquire him. And I think there's ways to balance all of this, but I mean, I read that and I cringed at that article because it's like, oh, so you guys spent no money this offseason for funsies.
Yeah, it's definitely not the optics you want to hear. I'm sure no one's going to love hearing that.
And I know it's like, yes, technically with Barlow and Hedges, it was close to $10 million. But if you look at Ahmed Rosario's contract coming off the books, it's close to a wash. You look at some of the other guys, it's like, I know arbitration increased, it's this and that. Their salary is probably up from a year ago, but ever so slightly. Probably not even at the rate of inflation.
Yeah, we'll see if there's any extensions in their pocket this spring. I'm not really sure if I really believe there are, but we're going to find out. And again, I just look at the optics of the comment like that, and I wish I'd like to go back and hear it in more context, obviously too. But if you by not bringing anybody else in, I mean, it's hard to sit there and say we definitely want to be competitive and win the division, and it's obviously a winnable division right now because the Twins certainly didn't get better this offseason. But again, doing these two things at the same time has proved to be very hard. They've been trying to do this since 2019, basically, and they kind of ran into it in 2022, but things kind of hit a wall last year, and it's not a lot of not a lot of teams can do this thing, especially with a rookie manager of all those things, to have that mixed messaging. Just like, this is the one thing I want to ask, some other people who are around the team a lot, is like, what is the direction of this team? And I'm just kind of tired of hearing the thread the needle, like, we're trying to win, but we're also trying to develop young players, because again, the odds of that actually working are very low. It worked in 2022, but there's a reason that they hit regression last year doing some of those things. And I don't know if adding Austin Hedges is going to inflate, anybody's WAR by 2 times in 2024. I guess we're going to find out. We'll talk a little more about Vogt and some of the other things that we think he can do this year, and a couple quick notes on some prospect lists that we found interesting all coming up. You want to buy some spring training tickets? You want to buy opening day tickets? If you're one of the people who wants to risk being downtown during the eclipse, I just attended a local community meeting about the eclipse, where being in the path of totality where I live, and all the things they have planned, I have chosen to abstain from opening day. But maybe I'll buy tickets last minute. Maybe I'll change my mind and I'll decide I want to go. If I do that, I think I'm going to go through Game Time, because they have last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. Always have the Game Time guarantee, where if you find a ticket in the same section row for less, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. And you also get a chance to view your seat before you buy it as well. All the prices are up front. Not one of those ticket sites where you select a ticket for $40 and then you get to checkout and it's like 118. You're like, where did that come from? So Game Time does not do that. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets and make it easy with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON. You will get $20 off your very first purchase on Game Time. Terms apply. Create the account and redeem our code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your very first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. My town is going to be wild for the eclipse. I have no idea what to do.
I think they made the right call. I'll just throw that out there. I think that is.
Yeah. With the 5:10 start. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And then just letting people in ahead of time to watch from there. I think that's a good call. Hopefully they'll broadcast that. I wonder if that's going to make that game more likely to be broadcast, just to show the eclipse.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just hoping I have internet. I'm hoping my grid doesn't go down where I live, because there's going to be so many people. Zips had their top 100 come out last week during Fangraphs Prospect Week. I always love Zips because, it's an unbiased take. It's more machine learning and database, always interesting. No Chase the Lauder in there. I don't really take anything away from Chase the Lauder not being in there, just because of a very limited sample size. But Rocchio is 42. Yeah, Rocchio at 42 if you haven't seen it. Manzardo at 60, which doesn't shock me. Burrito at 80 is interesting. And the most interesting one there was Angel Martinez at 92, which I don't think anybody had him in a top 100 anywhere, but everybody else, the rest of those guys all made it elsewhere. So Not a lot of shocks except for Martinez in the top and the Zips one, but
and there was 6 in the top 200. But I was earlier when I was trying to find who else kind of made it. And I couldn't find that additional, even when it had showed some guys further down the list, I couldn't find the rest of the list. I was kind of curious to see, okay, so who are these other 6 players? Like, I'm like, why did they cut off the list at 100? If you're going to then mention that they're 2024 by team, yeah, that they've got, 16 total guys in the top 500, 6 in the top 204. So it's like there's 2 more we don't know about who are in that 200 range.
Yeah. And then they had their 2025 picks to click to make the 2025 top 100 that didn't make it this year. And interestingly, they used Alex Clemmy as their header image for that. He's on that list, and so is Angel Janau, and so is Ralphie Velasquez.
It's a rough year for Janau.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who really like him and think he's going to grow into something special. I watched him last year, and like you can kind of see it. He does have some growing to do. I think he's a guy who can definitely play on the left side of the infield. I just don't know how much he's going to hit for power, but you could say that about 20 shortstops in the system. Like he might hit, but he might not hit for power. And I don't know. I just haven't quite seen it click for him yet. But he's only 19. He won't be 20 until May. Clemmy was interesting to me. I know you're not a big fan of him, but Cleveland just has not done well with high school pitchers. But
they haven't done well with guys with control issues. Like Mike Clevenger was the last guy whose control issues they fixed. Like if we go way back in time, when they made the Tobias Myers deal, I was like, oh, this makes sense because Tampa worked on his control issues. He just needs to maintain velocity, and Cleveland's better at maintaining velocity, helping guys find that extra gear. Clemmy already has the extra gear. Now they got to work on the command and the secondary offerings, which has not always been their strong suit. So that's why this was not my favorite pick, not because of Clemmy himself, but because what the organization has done best does not match up with this pitcher. And they've been awful terrible with high school pitchers. There's Tristan McKenzie, and who's next? Who's the next best guy?
Sam Henches.
I mean, can we even do 3 successful high school pitchers in the last 20 years?
Before that, definitely CC probably.
Yeah, that goes back more than 20 years. That's the problem. Like they're really bad, and they've drafted a ton of them, and it's just not worked out.
I thought it was interesting Clemmy making it though, because he's probably going to play most of the year in the Arizona Complex League. Like he might get to Lynchburg at some point this year, but very strange sometimes to put a guy on the top 100 list who wasn't here a year ago from high school if he doesn't face anything outside of the Complex League, because you can't gain a whole lot. Like I know you can watch stuff there and take away the visuals, but data wise, nothing really lands. Love Ralphie being on there. I'm super excited about that. I think he definitely is a guy who makes it to Lynchburg this year. I have more confidence in him making it to Lynchburg than I do Clemmy, just because of how conservative Cleveland is with pitchers, especially high school pitchers. I thought maybe we'd see Jason Chorio on there. That was about the only thing I thought we'd get, but I think he was on their list last year and didn't quite make it this year because Cleveland is, again, conservative with prospects.
They had that weird 2-year window where they got hyper unconservative, moved all those college guys super quick, like Tanner, like Gavin. And I know a lot of people, and then you and I kind of stuck with that old view that they don't move guys quickly, and people got mad at us, and they're not moving anyone else quickly outside of that grouping.
It was just a very special case. Very quickly before we get out of here, I probably saw Ahmed Rosario sign with the Rays for $1.5 million. I think that's an admission that the shortstop they did sign is probably not coming back, because they now have obviously Junior Caminero. They also decided to give Yu Chang a spot on the minor league roster, and now they signed Rosario. But he's not going to play short. He might play short, but he's going to play second. He's going to play some corner outfield. And he's going to play against left-handed pitching. And I feel like
he's a platoon bat.
I felt like just saying, I told you so. Like there were so many people out there who were saying like this, there was just so much insistence on his role last year. And that's, again, we want to get into spring training storylines a little bit more deeper with a guest here soon. But that's one of the ways I'm most interested in Vogt, is how can he be different? Because it was so painful sometimes to have Rosario playing shortstop every day when it was very obvious he could not play shortstop. And like you said off air, I'm not going to take your point, but whoever played shortstop that day had to hit second. They couldn't move him, and he kept playing against righties. And clearly, the Rays are going to put him a spot that's going to help the team. And this could have been done last year for Cleveland while he was here, and it could have allowed Gabriel Arias to play shortstop, and it could have allowed them to do different things. And that's what I want to see Vogt do the most, is not be so rigid in terms of roles and lineup spots, and just get guys opportunities, put them in spots to succeed. That was something that Tito was lauded for early on. And I'm not going to sit here and bash Tito because he's still a Hall of Fame manager, and there are things off
he
the field that he does importantly. Yeah.
Cement. Like everything was in cement. Everything was in ink. Nothing was, guys can't move around the lineup. And do guys get comfortable? Yeah. And there are certain guys who struggle when they're, who overthink. But this is a guy who found great success before the grain, putting Carlos Santana one. Like thinking with advanced thoughts. Like he could do that. But unfortunately, by the end, he was very, very set in specific mindsets and ways. And I am looking forward to someone who maybe the lineup is drastically different in order when you're facing a righty versus a lefty to take advantage of, what hitters can do.
Or just being willing to move guys around.
Yeah. Moving guys up and down, knowing that the worst statement ever last year was this team goes as a med goes. And it's like, no, the number 2 spot is the most important spot in the batting lineup. This team goes wherever the number 2 spot goes. If we put someone who was effective in that spot, things could have been a lot better. Like if Jose was hitting 2, it would have been a better team. I don't know if it's not like they're a playoff team, but it would have won more games. And I'm looking forward to a situation where someone's going to have that thought process where it's not about a med, it's about where you can put players to be most successful.
Exactly. I'm hoping that the first game on the Saturday, the 24th, Jose Ramirez is hitting second, because they did move up to second at points after Ahmed was gone. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm just interested to see
was hitting
a different
8 or
approach
9.
to things.
I wouldn't have had anywhere near the issues
and
against righties and against lefties too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's just being able to consider different ways to roster build and manage the roster. Yeah, I'm interested to see how Vogt does that versus how it has been done. That's, again, one of the things that we keep an eye on in spring training, among other things. We'll hope to have a guest on to talk about that soon. We got off-season review and spring training storylines very quickly. I don't know if you've been following, but JJ Weatherholt left the game Monday with a hamstring strain. Apparently had this issue last year, so something to keep an eye on. We are hoping to get Andre Knott on from spring training to talk about some of these things as well. Some of you liked our prospect hitter draft. We're going to do one for pitcher. Some of you didn't really like it, but that's okay. We're going to continue with the thought experiment anyway for the diehards that do love that stuff. And then we also have our second annual Guardians prospect draft we want to do as well. We did that last year. That was very well received, so we'll do that again. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have to get to position previews at some point this spring training too. We've got 9 of those to do.
Also want to tell people to go check out Burke Granger. We talked about him before getting hosed with some of his videos. He's got some up, including stuff from Akron Zips baseball locally. So go check out Burke as a rec at the end of the show. Thank you all for watching. Remember to rate and review, download daily, smash that like button, as they say, and go Guardians, go.